Between 1982 and 1984, Jean-Michel Basquiat enjoyed frequent trips to Los Angeles, staying for months at a time. He loved to work and live here in LA. He made lots of friends and appreciated the respite from New York and the opportunity to really focus in on his art here on the West Coast. During those years, he had 3 solo exhibitions at the Larry Gagosian Gallery. He maintained a studio space in Venice that Fred Hoffman found for him, and created a suite of prints with Hoffman. Tamra Davis was a film student at the Los Angeles City College and a gallery assistant who drove Jean-Michel around LA since he never learned to drive. Jeanine, myself, Larry, Fred, and Tamra are going to have a conversation that you all will get the opportunity to witness and observe and participate with later. And we're going to talk about Jean-Michel's time here in Los Angeles, and we'll be sharing personal anecdotes and things.
Larry Gagosian opened his first gallery for modern and contemporary art in 1980 in Los Angeles. Today, Gagosian has 19 exhibition spaces across the US, Europe, and Asia, designed by acclaimed architects. Let's please welcome Mr. Gagosian. Thank you. Fred Hoffman, to his right, is an art dealer, publisher, and art historian who co-curated the Basquiat exhibition for the Brooklyn Museum in 2005. Let's welcome Mr. Hoffman, please. And Tamra Davis is a filmmaker who directed Jean-Michel Basquiat, The Radiant Child. She began her career directing music videos for Depeche Mode, Sonic Youth, and NWA, among others, and has gone on to direct feature films and television shows. And she was also a personal friend of Jean-Michel. So please welcome her. So let's get to it.
Jeanine Heriveaux is the sister of Jean-Michel Basquiat and the co-executor of the Jean-Michel Basquiat estate. And I think that everyone up here, we're sisters, but everyone up here was a friend of Jean-Michel's, a personal friend of his. That's part of the reason why we were so excited about the opportunity to sit here and just kind of like riff and talk about Jean-Michel and share stories. So I think we're just as excited to hear some of these stories as all of you are.
Yeah, so let's start with you, Larry, since you knew him earliest, I believe. He came here in, was it 1980 that you met him? Can you give us a little idea about that?
1981. I think I met him in 1981. If my memory serves me, at Nina Nozet's gallery in Soho. It's kind of an interesting story. I apologize if you've heard it before. But a friend of mine, Barbara Kruger, was in a group show at Anina's, and she called me up, and I had a loft on West Broadway, which was around the corner, a couple blocks from Anina's gallery. And she said, "Larry, I'm in a group show at Anina's. What are you doing?" I said, I'm not doing anything. She said, "Well, why don't you come over?" So I walked over to Prince Street to Anina's gallery, and there were, as I recall, 3 exhibition rooms in the gallery. And the first one, there was some kind of a constructivist wooden sculpture guy. Can't recall his name. The next room was Barbara Kruger's work, which I could easily identify. It's similar to work she does now in a certain way. And then the next room, the third room and the last room in the gallery, I walked in there and I saw 5 or 6 paintings. And I actually, it just stopped me cold in my tracks. I mean, it was the kind of thing where my hair stood on end, literally. And I was just transfixed with, by these paintings and how powerful and original they seemed to me. And then Nina kind of waltzed over to greet me. She came, her office was just behind that room where the Basquiat paintings were hanging. And she said, "Larry, do you like these?" And I said, "I like them. I mean, they're insanely powerful and brilliant. And are any of them available?" And and she said, "Well, yeah, these 3 I haven't sold yet." And I said, "Well, how much are they?" And I think she said they were $3,500 each. sadly, I no longer own these paintings. Let me just cut to the chase on that somewhat painful topic. But I don't regret anything about the whole thing, by the way. But so I bought them. I bought all 3 of them. And then she said, "Would you like to meet the artists?" And I said, "Well, yeah, sure." Well, she says, she walked me into her office. I had no idea who Jean-Michel Basquiat is. You have to understand, I'd never seen a reproduction of one. I'd never heard his name. I had zero awareness, as virgin as you could be in that kind of a situation. And there's Jean-Michel sitting there smoking a joint with his trademark hair, and he had white painter's overalls on that were covered in paint. And I asked him if I could, smoke a little with him. So, so it was the right thing. It was the right way to start the relationship and the conversation.
And what was your first impression of him?
That he was extremely intelligent. I could see that immediately. Looking at him, just the way he handled himself. He was 20, 21 years old. He was poised. He was... I just thought he just struck me as a very intelligent person. And a couple of days later, Anina and Jean-Michel invited me to look at his studio, which was underneath her gallery. And it was just full of paintings, and they were all unbelievable. And I pitched him the idea of doing a show in my gallery in LA, in West Hollywood. And he was totally up for it. And Anina was very gracious about it. She gave it the green light. And that's how we met. And that's how he ended up coming to LA.
And parenthetically, that was Jean-Michel's first gallery exhibition in the United States.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. And so that year was, 19...
That was no. It was in April of 1982.
Okay. So Fred was. So Fred, what was your first recollection?
So Jean-Michel, I did not meet him when he came to do the show, Larry's first show in West Hollywood, which was on Almont, his original West Hollywood gallery. And I did see the show 2 or 3 times, blown away by it. Then Larry called me a little later in the year. It was November of 1982, and I was living in Venice, and I had just started a print publishing business called New City Editions. I was doing prints with some local artists, and I had also started working with Frank Gehry on what became known as the fish lamps. And Larry said that he was there with Jean-Michel. He had invited Jean-Michel to come back to Los Angeles in November, this is November 82, to both work and reside at Larry's new townhouse on Market Street in Venice. And Jean-Michel had moved in to the ground floor. It was completely separate from Larry's residence above. It was actually built as an art gallery and first opened actually as an art gallery. And then it had a separate living quarters. And Larry asked me if I'd like to come meet with Jean-Michel for the purpose of talking to Jean-Michel about making a silkscreen print, an edition. I said, absolutely. I came over, I think the next night after dinner, and Jean-Michel and Larry and I started talking. Jean-Michel presented to me the idea for a work which we started working on right away. And several months later, it was completed. It was called Tuxedo. Very important, large, very ambitious work in the medium of silkscreen. There's a variation of Tuxedo hanging in the show here that Jean-Michel actually partly painted over. It was a very ambitious print. It's the completed work is like 8.5 feet tall by 5 feet wide. And it took months to organize how to make this work. But Jean-Michel and I really connected right from the get-go. And I had a clear sense of how to bring it along, who to bring in. We had 10 different assistants working on it at different phases. And we went on to complete that and then made some other prints, which we can talk about later.
By the way, just to add one little footnote.
Oh yeah,
I named the piece when I saw the piece as black with white. It's like a written piece, and there was a white crown on the top, and then it was all text. And I said, you got to call that tuxedo. And John wasn't the easiest guy to convince about anything, but but I'm very proud that I named that piece, and Fred of course realized it and made it into a very significant work.
Thank you.
Tamra, how did you meet Jean-Michel?
I met Jean-Michel when he was coming to do the show at Larry's Gallery. I was really good friends with Matt Dyke, who worked for Larry at the time, and I worked at another gallery down the street called Ulrika Cantor Gallery. I was going to film school, and that was my job during the day, was working at the gallery. And so Matt and I were kind of assigned to take care of Jean-Michel while he was in Los Angeles, because he didn't really know anybody, and we knew like all the clubs to go to and what to do. And so kind of like Larry was like, you got to take care of him. You guys go and like pick him up, take him to clubs. And then it was like time to pick him up at the airport. And like Matt, I think I got assigned to like pick him up at the airport, because like nobody wanted to go get him. And it was like, Matt's like, you go get him. I've got to like take care of the gallery. And I like go to pick up Jean-Michel, and I had no idea what he looked like. Like I didn't know who he was or anything. And so I go and I see this guy, and he's like, so gorgeous, but like nothing you've ever seen. And I was like, oh my God, I think that's him. And I don't think he had, I swear to God, I don't think he had any luggage, or if he did, it was just like a bag or something.
He probably
like,
didn't.
It was like, he didn't have anything. And I was like, do you have any luggage? Like, are we going to baggage claim? And so I just remember coming back over to the studio, and yeah, and it was like was Matt living there? It was like there was a little house in West Hollywood.
He was driving because I had lost my license.
Yeah, remember that little house on that back street?
Nemo, that was a house, yeah.
Yeah, that little house on Nemo. I brought him over there, and it was like, yeah, it was, and he made a big splash when he first came to town, for sure. Yeah.
So there's a couple of things out of that story. One is buy art. Invest in art, buy art. And then the second thing is, I'd love to know like what your relationship was like, each one of you. Like, what was your relationship like with Jean-Michel? What was the kind of the thread and the gist of the relationship, the interactions? And I know Jean-Michel, like, he was very clear about what he wanted, what he didn't want. You know, we absolutely know that. But what was the relationship like?
Well, I was selling paintings, you know. He was making paintings in my house and living in my house. He had his own, you know, living area, and he painted downstairs in the studio, which turned out to be an ideal place for him to work. And I was dealing with his work, and I was also becoming a good friend, and we were, you know, hanging out a lot, going out a lot, having a lot of fun. It was kind of a golden moment.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, we want to hear more about that.
Don't
we want to know, like, what were they doing? Hanging out. What were you doing?
We were having a good time. We'd go shopping. We'd go to restaurants. We'd drive around town. It was kind of, you know, it's a long time ago. I don't remember everything about it, but I remember that it was very enjoyable. And I had this absolute genius working in my house, and I got access to his work, and we became really genuinely good friends. At least I think it's fair for me to say that. And I really loved the guy, and we had a lot of fun. He liked to have a good time. I mean, he was a hard worker, but when he wanted to have a good time,
play hard. He
knew how to do it.
Yeah.
I think though, once parenthetic to what Larry said, I think as the night went deeper into the night, Larry and I probably were backed off, and he basically started hanging out with the people of his generation in the clubs. I went
like,
several
speak for
times
yourself.
to clubs with him. But I usually left on my own, and he stayed. I mean, Jean-Michel, I don't know when he slept. I mean, he was basically working from the middle of the day through into the night, and then out every night out. My relationship was obviously a bit different. I did not have a gallery. It was, in a way, two professional relationships. I have a background in the history of art, of a PhD. So we shared a lot about art history together. I think I had a very engaged relationship with Jean-Michel around Leonardo da Vinci. I had a fairly extensive library of books on da Vinci, which I would bring over to the studio all the time, and we would rifle through them. Other art history books, I would just bring them on and look. He could go through a book in 20 minutes, and so we shared the history of art together. And then I had a professional relationship with him as the producer of what turns out to be, with the exception of one print that Nina made with Jean-Michel, the only edition works he made during his short lifetime. We produced six editions. Beyond Tuxedo, we made another very ambitious piece called Untitled. We made Back of the Neck. We made this 5-part piece called Untitled from Leonardo, and 2 single images, Leonardo-derived images. And then beyond that, after this first engagement in the Venice at Larry's house, Jean-Michel decided he wanted to come back to Los Angeles and have his own studio, which I actually found for him, which was like 3 doors down from Larry's house, also on Market Street, where Jean-Michel worked in, did not reside in. He lived at the Hermitage Hotel in West Hollywood and worked in, again, a second foray in Los Angeles from the fall of 1983 through sort of May, June of 1984, during which time we worked together on a series of silkscreen prints that he used images derived from original drawings that were turned into silk screens that were then screened onto canvases. And I also helped him on this famous series of paintings, and B-Dub was involved, and Matt was very involved. These large works, 2 of which are in the gallery, these very unusual works that are on wood slat fencing material, which derived from a fence that was on the back side of Jean-Michel's studio, his own studio on Market Street. One night he went out into this little back court and tripped over a homeless person who had wedged themselves between 2 slats. And he was completely freaked out when I came in the next day. And I said, well, there's a few options. We can rebuild it, make it sturdier, or alternatively, we can take down the wood fencing material, and you just don't need to go out into the courtyard. You can hang out in your studio. You don't really need to go out into the Venice onto Speedway Avenue at 2 in the morning. It's
not a nice neighborhood.
Not the coolest idea in the world. So maybe just play it safe. He said, yeah, we'll go for that. So I said, okay, we started taking down the wood fencing material, and I went to get the dumpster to throw all the wood's fencing material in the dumpster. And he said, no, I won't bring it all inside. And we started carrying all this wood slat material into the studio, stacking it up. I left. I come back the next day, and he's got a whole crew of people assembling these wood slat pieces of fencing material into picture supports, which turned out to the great piece, Edie, in your collection called Gold Griot, one of the greatest works in Jean-Michel's oeuvre. And there was also the great work, the companion piece, Flexible, which used to be in the estate, which you sold a few years ago. And then in addition made a few other wood slat pieces, fortunately, too.
Why are you telling all the people what we sold? Fred, you're in the dealer business. We're not.
Some of these people know who owns it, so I might as well come clean about it.
I'm teasing. Tamra, so clearly you all were having fun. What was going on?
I'd say like what I loved about hanging out with Jean-Michel, or my relationship with Jean-Michel, is I guess like first it was with Matt Dike. Matt and I were best friends, and Matt was kind of ran the LA music scene. Like if you wanted to go to clubs and hang out in LA, you wanted to hang out with Matt Dike. And so like I think like those are I like love the memories of Jean-Michel and Matt like playing records together. And it was also at the time that Matt was just about starting his label, Delicious Vinyl. And so in his studio above Santa Monica Boulevard, where Jean-Michel would be all the time, he was having Tone Loc. And I was doing those videos back in those early days. So for Tone Loc, Wild Thing and Young MC, Bust a Move. And so those guys were coming in and out of the studio. And it was really fun to see Jean-Michel kind of like interacting with like the LA kind of music rap scene, and Matt Dike, what Matt was really into. And it was also right at the same time Matt was starting to work with the Beastie Boys as well. And so this New York, LA kind of hip hop, you know, Jean-Michel really loved being like kind of close to that. That's like something he felt really familiar with. And so I think like I remember those fun times, and it was this kind of combination that I combined. So whenever he came to LA, it was this kind of music connection that was really strong in the clubs and what was going on in the LA music scene. But it was also, I was really involved in the film world, and I was going to film school, and I wanted to see all these like cool old movies. So we would constantly go to old films. And I think like Jean-Michel, if he wasn't an artist, he would have been a filmmaker. So
we think the same thing. Yeah.
He was always wanting to talk to me about filmmaking and films and like going to see movies and all that kind of stuff. So I think like that's kind of like I represented in a way, like whenever he came here, like film and music and that aspect of his life, which was really exciting. And he, like you said, he really engaged when you met him. He wasn't like just hanging out, like he drilled you for questions, and he really wanted to go deeper and know things and get to, you know, kind of like that. But there was also like this times when you hung out with him that there was like this danger involved. Like I always felt like something crazy could happen, like there was always like this risk that he like volatile, like anything could happen at any moment, like, and you could be in trouble or danger. Like
that's a New York thing.
Is it? I don't know. I just feel like, oh my God, we're gonna get in trouble. And yeah, so there was always like this edge of danger. So that was kind of fun, but also, yeah.
So how did you go about interviewing him and filming him?
Well, it was kind of like, because I always had a camera in my hand back in those days. I would carry like a Super 8 or a Bolex in my hand all the time. And he said that I should film him, like that's who I should make his subject and that I should make a documentary about him because he was going to be a really big famous artist. Yeah. And I was like, yeah. And we joked about it, but he like was really serious. Like he really felt like he is going to be important. And so like a lot of times he would call to say like he's in town, like we got to do some filming. Like it was like, you know, yeah, we got to film some today. You know, you should come by the studio and film. And I'm like, yeah. And so I never knew for sure. Like I think it was a great excuse because I really would come down and film, but it was also like I think he felt like we were doing something too, you know, like we're really making a film here. And I was like, yeah, I'm down to film. It was so fun. And, but yeah.
What about the interviewing part?
The interviewing, we did that almost like later. Cause I feel like we filmed a lot of stuff before that. We would just sometimes go out and film an afternoon. Like we'd go to the racetrack and film, or we would go to a flea market. Like he just wanted to go out and film all the time. And so, but the documentary part came kind of later. Like I'd say that was cause we filmed it when he was at the hotel. Like, so that was like kind of a few times later than when he first came. Yeah. So,
and I'm sorry, what hotel was that? Was that the L'Hermitage? Or?
Yeah, the L'Hermitage. Oh, wow. So I think like we kind of had filmed, and then we were like getting more and more serious because he was actually getting more famous and he wanted to really document it. Yeah, it was really important to him. And so that's when Becky, who was like one of my other best friends and his friend, came and did it.
I should say that I think Jean-Michel had already had a couple of interview experiences which didn't go so well. And he felt so comfortable with Tammy and Becky that it was so fluid, and really the best documentation of Jean-Michel on camera.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think one of the things with Jeanine and I in curating this exhibition was we really wanted to give people insight into the man behind all of the work. And that's actually one of the reasons why we decided to have this panel series. You know, a couple of weeks ago, we had a conversation with Jeffrey Deitch, who's actually sitting here, and Kenny Scharf to talk about the New York experience. And for us, this is an opportunity to really round out and share more about who Jean-Michel actually is as a person, because we think that that's what you all really want to know, you know. I know, Larry, that you made some introductions for Jean-Michel while he was here. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that Mrs. Brode is sitting here in the audience. Thank you so much for coming. And Joanne. And I know, Larry, you made some introductions while Jean-Michel was here. So maybe you can more formally introduce Mrs. Brode and also talk a little bit about those people that you introduced Jean-Michel to and some of that.
Well, I get invited to parties that Jean-Michel didn't necessarily want to attend. And
tell us more about that.
I would like push him. I said, come on, you can do it. It's Beverly Hills crowd, you know. So I remember Marcia Weissman was having a birthday party for her brother, Norton Simon, at her home on Angelo. And I said, let's go. Yeah, I don't want to go. It's going to be boring. And, you know, and I said, well, yeah, maybe, but we can leave. So so we went, and
that's the part of the story we want to hear.
And of course, Basquiat walked in smoking a joint, which made an impression on Marcia Weissman. And then he ended up getting some gal to go to one of the bedrooms and having some fun with her. So I mean, he was very much capable of living off the land. I mean, he could adapt very quickly.
Yes.
He could adapt very quickly. So what turned out to be what he anticipated would be a very painful experience, he turned into something that he had more fun than I did. Let me put it that way. And of course, I don't want to overlook the very interesting footnote, more than a footnote. He was living in the house with me where everything's going great. He's making paintings. We're having a good time. We're really getting to know each other and getting into a fair amount of trouble every now and then. And then he said, my girlfriend's going to come stay with me. She's going to kind of move in. And I'm saying, oh shit. Sometimes one too many eggs can spoil an omelet. Everything's going on. What do you mean? Well, I'm somebody I really care about. And I said, okay. And I said, what's her name? And he said, her name is Madonna. I said, what kind of a fucking name is Madonna?
Larry, I don't know.
I really didn't know who she was. And I'll tell you how prescient he was and attuned to culture. Well, he said, she's going to be the biggest pop star in the world. And he was right. And she moved in, and she was quite easy to be with also. We had a lot of fun. And it turned out not to be a bummer. She was a good sport. She lived there for a couple of months, and that's how we rolled.
I like it.
One story that should probably be told. So Larry called me one day and said, listen, can you take Jean-Michel and Madonna to the commissary at 20th Century Fox for lunch? And I said, my pleasure. And Larry, I think it probably through Doug Kramer, had arranged for us, the three of us, to go. And we sat at this raised area that was sort of overlooking where the general population of the commissary would eat. And it was sort of like a box, a separate box. And I'll never forget this. I sat behind the two of them. The two of them were in the front, and it was like a little thing of four. And Madonna looked out over this audience of 500 people probably, and pointed her finger and said, someday everybody in this room is going to know who I am. And Jean-Michel, all he could do was blush. It was, I'll never forget that.
The importance of being clear about what you want and stating it.
So let's talk about, so we spoke about how you drove him around a lot. Do you have any stories about driving around, hanging out with him? Is there any specific story you can tell us?
I just feel like it was a great time in LA, and I feel like that time in LA hasn't really been documented so well. So it was this kind of really fun time of music and a club scene, and where people were all really getting along really well. And I don't know, I feel like it was just like this really great time. And I didn't say, I don't know. I think it was kind of like the fun times. I mean, it's so nice that there's people here in the audience that we all used to go and dance with. And to me, I feel like that was one of my favorite things, is if you could just go out dancing with Jean-Michel, it would make you so happy. He was one of the best dancers ever. And everywhere you went with him, it was like you were kind of like the center of attention. Everyone would look at you, and, and he would create a scene everywhere you went. Sometimes it wasn't a good scene. Sometimes it was like, you realize like, they're staring at us. They don't think we have money or we don't belong here or something. But most of the time, it was more like, I think he did like to shock people as well. He liked to see what kind of an impression he was going to make on people, to see who they were. And I think he liked the shock value of that. So he liked to see how shocked he could make people. So, yeah.
Fred, if you can give us a little bit more about just, your relationship with him and your friendship and how, how close you were to him, and, what that relationship was about.
Well, I felt we shared a lot, and he's had such a great understanding of the history of art. He understood exactly how he saw himself in the lineage of great artists. One little story: we were working on these when he was in his second studio, working on these silkscreen paintings, which were basically take a silkscreen, apply it to a painting, and then he would paint over it. And there was a whole group of guys that would be holding these different screens. He'd take that one, let's use red, and started building up these paintings. Ultimately, it was like 40 different paintings we made, but working on several at once. And as he started working, it became so clear about, oh my gosh, he has complete understanding of the practice of the great masters, especially someone like Robert Rauschenberg. So I said, oh, what a great opportunity. was very close to the Grinsteins. I call up Stanley and I say, isn't Bob in town now working? He said, yes. I said, would it be too much to ask if I could bring over somebody who I'm working with, a young artist named Jean-Michel Basquiat, to meet Rauschenberg? So after dinner one night, I got Jean-Michel, and we I took Jean-Michel to Gemini, GEL, on Melrose, and brought him in and basically left him. I introduced him to Bob and left him. And he and Bob spent an hour in the print shop area, and it was a complete connection. And he went back there a couple of times after that, once with me and I know on his own. So I think we really understood each other, and I think I provided certain skills that he could use, and I could help take where he wanted to go further. For example, it was clear right from the time I first met Jean-Michel, who was collaging, and you can see in some of the paintings in the show here, collaging unique drawings onto his canvases and painting over it. Well, that really was not a sustainable method of operation over, imagine, a lifetime. You just couldn't keep up with, make enough drawings. And also the drawings obviously might have a value in themselves. So he first started making photocopies of original drawings and collaging those into paintings. And there are some examples in the show here, some in different museums.
I know.
Thank you. Well, an ultimate example. And then it became clear to him after we made Tuxedo that he could actually use silkscreen and not go into photocopying. Photocopies weren't the most sustainable medium to use. And so he started integrating silkscreen images in the paintings. Now, the point is that I think I understood where he wanted to go, and I could help get him there quickly.
Yeah. So I think, Jean-Michel Basquiat is one of the greatest painters of all times. And I think what is so unique about Jean-Michel is that, yes, he was a painter. Yes, he was a poet. Yes, he loved film. Yes, he loved music. And I think what's so wonderful about him is that he has also established himself within the arena of popular culture. Emerging artists look to Jean-Michel for inspiration. And people, if you look around this room, this is about as diverse a room as you can possibly have from an age, from all the demographics, including age. So my question to each one of you is, what is it about Jean-Michel? Why do you think that Jean-Michel, what was different and what is different about Jean-Michel Basquiat that makes him the phenomenon that he actually is today?
Well, let me, do you mind if I try to answer that? Well, he was just a genius. He had more raw talent than any artist I've ever encountered, or for that matter, anybody's encountered. He just was a natural. And he, I remember talking to him about a painting. He said, people ask me, why do I put the blue here or the green here? He said, I just know. And he had incredible instincts and incredible energy. And everything kind of came together. It was he was a miracle in a certain way. Everything came together. The ability to draw, he understood scale. Look at this. He understood all the, but he did it. He knew it. He may have looked at books of Da Vinci and Cy Twombly, who he, studied rather closely. But above all, he just had this something that doesn't come along but once in a, lifetime. That you can't, it's hard to quantify or qualify what that is. It's just an amazing talent. And he knew he was good, and he knew that, and he just loved making art. He loved making art because
in all forms,
and then he could, because he makes something that and wow, this doesn't suck. I'll make another one. So he just had an incredible energy for work. He made a lot of work in a sadly short life. He made a lot of great work.
And he didn't only come here to, work, to do work and do these exhibitions with you. He came back and forth all of the time. So what do you think that appeal was of LA and stopping here so frequently?
A change of scenery, friends that he made, the climate, getting out of New York. Not such a bad idea every now and then.
No.
I think it was actually partly, I think by the time he came here for your second show, to produce the second show, he was already conflicted about how he was being received in New York. And I think there were certain people in the New York art world that really just weren't willing to engage Jean-Michel's work. And I think that hurt him a lot. And I think he became even more introspective. And I think that LA provided a relief valve where he didn't have to really be under that intense pressure of making it in New York. He could just come out here and, as you've expressed, enjoy himself. And he could also come out here and get a lot of work done. It's the crazy thing is, even today, it's just hard to imagine how much work Jean-Michel produced here in Los Angeles. At least 100 canvases, over 18 months. It's an extraordinary amount of work. So I think LA provided something that is a counterpoint to New York in a way. And, he went back to New York a lot. He wasn't, he had a couple of periods where he was here for 2-3 months, but he went back and forth a lot. But and then eventually he discovered Hawaii, which was even a greater relief valve.
Yeah, we rented a house. I found a house in Kapalua, and it was a really cool house because there were basically two houses, and I had one house and Jean-Michel had the other house, And I was only there for about a month. He went back several times and produced a handful of paintings. He didn't really work that much there. He just enjoyed being in Hawaii. And it was also kind of a way to get him away from drugs to a certain degree and get, just to kind of mellow him out and get, the Hawaiian vibe suited him. We had a lot of fun in Hawaii, but yeah, you're right, Fred. It was like another distance from New York. And let's not overlook the fact it bears mentioning that there was a fair amount of racism.
Thank you for going there, because that was going to be let's talk about what some of those challenges were in New York, and I think a lot of artists today are dealing with some of that same thing.
Well, I think it's
important to talk about what he lived through.
Thank God, we're at a time where most of those railings have been removed, and
most, but not actually all.
Well, no, they're and black artists have gotten their due. It's way overdue. Jean-Michel was really kind of a pioneer in that. He didn't want to be a pioneer, but he turned out that was a role that he took. But I can tell you instances of very pointed racism that I was aware of that would be shocking if you heard them today. I'll give you one example, because I think examples are more interesting than generalities.
Thank you.
There was an artist who had a pretty good artist. He had a good career with a big gallery, and I'm not going to name the artist, but he had gone to a dinner party at a very important collector's house, which I was dying to go to because I heard they had some really good art, and I'd never been invited. So I asked him, well, what's the collection like? What do they have? I've heard it's really, a top drawer collection. He said they have a lot of great things, but they fucked it up because they've got a Basquiat. And he was dead serious.
Yeah.
He was dead serious. Then another time there was a restaurant we used to all go to called Mickey's One University. It became kind of like at a certain moment the art restaurant in New York. It was lower Fifth Avenue, and I had dinner one night with Ross Bleckner, a very talented artist, and David Sally, also a very talented artist. And this is the strangest conversation. They said, Larry, you seem to know the art market pretty well. You seem to you seem to know what you're doing. We'd like to invest in art. We'd like to collect art. Can you give us some ideas of who? They were dead serious, by the way. They were asking me what they should, and I said, I can't. You can't do any better than owning a Basquiat. And they said, come on, no, seriously. So. And there was always a subcurrent of that, and there are other examples, but
not to mention
they regret that
the
today.
critics.
The critics, yeah,
Hilton Kramer,
well, the critics,
Robert Hughes,
critics,
and the Museum of Modern Art.
Yeah, well, I tried to give a painting to the Museum.
Yeah, what's
of Modern
up with
Art.
that?
I offered Ann Temkin. I don't mind naming her.
That was more recent.
A major painting as a gift, and they wouldn't accept it.
And the Shores did that many years even before that.
It's a true story.
I mean, there's more than one occasion where the Modern's been offered paintings that they've turned down.
Well, they regret it today.
Maybe, because they still haven't done it.
They're not in step, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I think he was, in a way, so ahead of his time, because, like, when he came out, it was right at this time, like, there was like a crack was opening in culture for him to emerge, because in the club scenes it was all mixed. Like, we were all dancing together, we were all hanging out, but then you'd get on the street and it wasn't like that at all. And I feel like that was what was so frustrating, and it felt the same way as like being like a woman trying to be a filmmaker. It was like the walls seemed so high for us. It was like, there's no way you're going to be a female director. There's no way you're going to be a successful Black artist. But we felt like with the culture that we were living in, that anything was possible. And we kind of felt that shift and that kind of hopefulness in like what we were seeing happening with hip hop music, and that becoming popular, and club culture becoming, and where it was all starting to really break through, and we were all starting to emerge. And I felt like to him, he felt like it was it's the natural next step. And I felt like that's where he would get so sad that like they weren't ready for him yet, you know? And
Well, the Broads were ready, let me tell you.
That's right.
Yeah, people were ready. Thank God people saw that. But it was like just that feeling where you know it's coming and you just wait for
I remember
people to
taking
see
him
it.
over to Eli and Edie's, and sit there on the couch smoking a joint, and Eli was
You all
he was
smoked a
cool
lot.
with it. he was kind of amused and fascinated by Jean-Michel, and I think they kind of got along. They had a good rapport, as did Edie, and they were the earliest collectors of Jean-Michel's art. Certainly with that kind of an ambition, and great credit to Eli and Edie.
Absolutely. And continuing to showcase his work, right across the street at the Broad. I mean, it blows us away how much, people have supported Jean-Michel and ensured that people could see and witness the work of this incredible artist. And so it means a lot to us. Thank you, for sure. Yeah. Do each one of you have any advice maybe for emerging artists or people who are, in that space of, whatever the thing is, whatever the art is, right?
Network.
'Cause there's a lot of ways to
Network
express
with
art.
other like-minded souls.
Network with other artists. I mean,
Network with other artists.
I'm asked that all the time. And just get to know other artists and see if they, kind of dig what you're doing, because that's probably the best path is to, I hear about artists that way. Somebody said, well, you got to go see, and it's usually from artists. So you've got to get into the community of other artists. And of course you got to be talented,
That helps.
You can't do it just with strategy. But it's right now is a very, it's a very good time, I guess, to be an artist in a certain sense, but there's also the careerism that can creep into that thing. So it cuts both ways. It's a good way to make a living. And so a lot of artists are out there making a living, which is great. Why shouldn't artists make a good living? But then, exceptional talent is something else. And that doesn't come along every day.
I love that advice. Actually, we're doing a film series with Ava DuVernay up the street at Array Studios, and they gave the same advice. I think a lot of times people go to people who are very successful and they want those folks to kind of help them, which is great and wonderful. But when you network with other people who are doing the same thing, that's how you get to hone your craft. And that's how you get to kind of know more about what's happening out there versus always trying to go to those one or two people that you're expecting to help you out. So I'm really happy that you are sharing that with people.
I would just also add that to do the work, like that's what Jean-Michel did. Is
He worked.
He worked. It wasn't just saying like, I'm going to be the greatest artist or people are going to he did so many paintings.
He made it so.
He made it so. And the same thing with myself. I wasn't just going to be like, oh, I'm going to be a filmmaker. I had a camera. I was filming constantly, making films, showing them. And I feel like that's, if you're going to do it, you hope that you get discovered one day. And, networking is all really good, but it's not because you just did one painting or two paintings or one film. It's really, you never know what's going to hit and you just have to keep doing the work.
Just doing the work. Absolutely. Jeanine, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to know if there was anything else that you can speak about his time in Venice Beach and, in that era.
I mean, it was just a pleasure to have him as a roommate. And he was like my room. I mean, we lived in the same house, and he had a job, I had a job, and then we'd have fun. But he was very, very self-reliant, and he knew how to figure things out on his own. He was extremely intelligent. I mean, I never heard anybody get the best of him. If you tried to outwit him, you paid a price. And he was very, very smart. And he could have a wicked sense of humor. And there was an interview. Henry Gelzeller interviewed Jean-Michel for Interview magazine, and it was a good interview. And Jean-Michel, took it seriously. And the last question that Gelzeller asked Basquiat was that, Jean-Michel, your art deals with a lot of the struggles that you've gone through and your heritage and your difficulties you've had, and there's some anger that runs through a lot of your art, but there's also humor. And Basquiat had the best answer. You couldn't write a better answer. He says, "Well, sometimes people laugh when you fall on your ass."
Exactly. Simple.
That was how quick he was. That's how quick he was. His intelligence was remarkable.
He was turned on. He was awake.
He was a genius.
Absolutely. All right. Well, couple of things. One is, so we're from New York, and so we kind of came to Los Angeles, and we're learning Los Angeles while we're here. We're learning the culture. We're learning that people don't really like to come out and drive because you all with the traffic thing is a little, oh no, I get it. But one of the things that we would love is that if you would tell people about the exhibition, tell your friends, send some folks through. We'd really appreciate that. I think it is mind-blowing and heartwarming to our family how appreciated Jean-Michel is as an artist and as a man and as an inspiration to so many people. We don't take it lightly. This is an incredible legacy to be responsible for. Our father, Gerard Basquiat, worked so hard to claim his son and to make sure that Jean-Michel's legacy was protected and honored. And Jeanine and I are doing the best we can to do the Lisane and Jeanine version of Watching Out for Our Brother. And so we just really want to thank Larry, Fred, and Tamra. We know how busy you all are. And we really appreciate the fact that you would make time to come out and sit down with us and talk about Jean-Michel and share here publicly because, you didn't have to do it. So we really, really do appreciate it. Thank you, Mrs. Broad. Thank you, Joanne. Thank all of you for Jeffrey. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it.